So my name is Heather Lewis. I'm the manager of international services here on the main campus at Sault College. And I'm very grateful that Elizabeth and Mary are helping us out today and hosting this session for all of you, our students. So I will pass it over to Elizabeth and Mary in just a second. One thing I will ask for the sake of helping to better answer some of your questions throughout this session. One, please listen to the session if you could, because I think a lot of your questions will be answered. But then also, please use the question and answer box rather than the chat function, because it's easier to control on the backside when we are looking to help answer some of your questions. So, Elizabeth, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you so much, Heather. It's great to be here as always. So we are immigration lawyers in Toronto, but we certainly help people from around the world immigrate and stay in Canada. As Heather has said, so today we're going to do our presentation first. We're going to go first through the temporary residence and what you need to do to maintain your status and get your work permit. And then we're going to talk about ways to get permanent residence. And, you know, international immigration laws right now change so fast that what we tell you today is true today, but who knows, tomorrow it probably might change. Certainly in a month or two, there's going to be a lot of changes. So for those of you who have registered, we will be putting you on our list of people who we will be sending out news on immigration changes as well that might affect you. Hope you like it. If you don't like it, you are certainly well able to unsubscribe as well. Okay. All right. So let's get started. Okay. So the first thing that we want to talk about is we want to talk about temporary residence and how to maintain your status as a student and also later on as a worker. Okay, so when you have your study permit on there, you will have a validity date, and certainly your status, unless you do something to file to extend your status, it's going to end on that validity date. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't end before that date. That's because as international students, you could lose your status after 90 days if you don't actively pursue your studies. You're not registered as a student because you didn't go to class, or you're not writing your exams, etc. Okay, so there are two exceptions to the rules. One is the scheduled breaks. That's everybody in your program has those breaks. Those breaks are listed in the academic calendar. For example, if you have a summer break or you have spring break, those breaks, certainly you are still actively pursuing, counted as actively pursuing your studies. The other one is more personal. And those are situations where you yourself may say, you know what, for this semester, maybe I have some health problems. Maybe my family member has some problems and I have to go and help them. For any sort of personal reason, you can apply for an authorized leave. And who do you apply for authorized leave? You apply to the school. You apply to Sault College. You go see Heather and or other people in your school, and you say, I for this one semester, I may not be able to study. Can I take this semester off with the school's permission? You have to get that permission from the school. If you do, then that semester can be counted as authorized leave. And you can take up to 150 days, one semester for leave, and still keep your status. Okay. But you have to get that authorization from the school at the beginning. Working while you are studying. So first of all, you can only work if you are a full-time student. If you go down to part-time studies, Other than the last semester you can be a part-time student and still work, but otherwise you can only work if you're a full-time student. Now, once you've completed your studies, you are no longer a student. Okay, the IRCC says if you get the first indication from the school, you've completed your studies. At that point, you're not a student anymore. So you have to stop working at that time. The only exception to the rule is if you have been accepted to a second program, and that program is going to start in a semester. So for example, let's say I finish my first program in April, and I've already been accepted to a second program in September. If that's the case, then I can work the summer in between the two programs.
Okay, so it's also very important to maintain your status properly while you're studying and apply for extensions on your study permit if you need them. So the first thing that you should do right now is pull out your study permit and look at the date that's listed on the permit as your expiry date. Write it down on your calendar, put it in your phone, pay attention to this date, because if your study permit is going to expire before your program finishes, you do need to apply to extend your permit before that expiry date. If you properly submit a study permit extension application before the expiry date on your study permit, then you will have what's called maintained or implied status. And implied status allows you to continue studying while you wait for a decision on your extension application. One thing that's important to know about implied status is that it does require you to be in Canada. So you need to be in Canada while you wait for a decision on the new application. Otherwise, if you leave Canada, then your implied status will end. And another thing to keep in mind is, so let's say what happens if your study permit has expired and you don't have status anymore? Well, you may still be in what's called the restoration period. And when you're in the restoration period, you're allowed to apply to restore your status. So the restoration period is 90 days from the date of the expiry on your study permit. So if you file a restoration application within those 90 days, then you can apply to get your status back. So it's really important to know that that 90-day deadline is extremely strict, and the clock starts ticking on the day that you lose your status. And that day is either the day that your study permit expires, or if you had filed to apply for a study permit extension, it's the day that you get that refusal letter from IRCC. So if your study permit's expired or you get a refusal on your study permit extension, keep in mind that you have that 90-day period to submit a restoration application.
And I just wanted to differentiate between an application that is properly submitted and an application that is returned because you have not properly submitted the application. So if your application is properly submitted, you extend your time until a decision is made. So even if you get that application rejected, your clock for the restoration starts running at the time of the rejection. But if your application is returned and they said you didn't pay the right fees or submit the right forms, if that is the case, then the time actually started kicking in when your study permit ended, not when the decision is made, because you didn't actually, they count you as not having submitted the application. All right, so let's talk about post-grad work permits. Oftentimes people ask me, well, how do I apply for a post-grad work permit? But that's actually not the first question you should ask. The first question you should ask is, should I apply for a post-grad work permit? Because oftentimes, even if you qualify for a post-grad work permit, sometimes you shouldn't be applying for that post-grad work permit right away. For example, I have people who qualify for a post-grad work permit after studying for a one-year program. But if they applied for a postgrad work permit after the 1-year program, they only get a postgrad work permit for 1 year. And oftentimes, that person may need a longer period of time to get the work experience that they need in order to get permanent residence. And if they just got that 1-year postgrad work permit, they might not be able to, because you only get one postgrad work permit in your lifetime. So, they might not be able to extend their work permit afterwards. And then after all of that, everything is in vain. They might have to leave Canada. Okay. So even before you apply for your postgrad work permit, it's often a good idea to come and see a lawyer like us and get your plan so that you can see. Because maybe that person might have been better served if they went to a second program. So if they did 2 1-year programs, they would get a 3-year work permit, which would give them more leeway to find a job, because sometimes it takes a while to find a job and get that work experience that they might need. Okay, sometimes right now with the points so high, you might need 2 years of work experience, etc. One of the things that you need to understand as well about postgrad work permits is that not all programs will qualify. The distance education program, during COVID, we had a lot of leeway with distance education, but now back to the old rules. If your program is more than 50% of it is distance education, then you're going to have an issue getting the postgrad work permit. Also, full-time status is a must except in the last semester. Sometimes I have students who ask me, oh, I am having a lot of trouble this semester. Maybe I just want to take a few courses, but I can't carry a full workload. Should I just go part-time? Depending on their circumstances, but if they wanted a postgrad work permit, if they went part-time, they probably wouldn't be eligible for the postgrad work permit. Instead, if they asked for authorized leave from the school and took the entire semester off, and then came back fresh the next semester and became full-time students, then they would be eligible for the postgrad work permit. Okay, so full-time status is very, very important. Sometimes people say, well, I'm not going to get a very good grade on this course. I might fail it. In fact, I'd rather not have it on my transcript. Why don't I just take it off? Again, that would disqualify you from the postgrad work permit if it brings your credits down to the part-time status. I would rather see someone fail, but still show that they took the class for that semester, and then they will still be eligible for the postgrad work permit. So let's talk about timing for when you should apply for the postgrad work permit. Now, the IRCC website tells you you can apply up to 180 days after you finish your program. But I'm here to tell you a different timeline to follow. If you were to apply after 90 days, you're going to experience a lot of difficulties because in order to get your postgrad work permit, you need to maintain your student status. And so you lose your student status 90 days afterwards. Okay, so that's quite problematic for a lot of people. What I would suggest you guys do is keep this timeline in mind. 90 days after you've completed your program. That means 90 days after the first indication the school has told you, not when you convocate and get your diploma on stage, okay? It's when the school has told you, you have completed the requirements of your program. That's the day that you stop being a full-time student. You start counting from that date, 90 days forward. That's your deadline. And the second thing you have to understand is you also have to keep a valid study permit. So if your study permit expires before that 90 days, then the deadline is your study permit. If your study permit expires after the 90 days, then your deadline is the 90 days, whichever comes first, okay? And if you did that, if you applied within those timelines, then even if you don't have the work permit in hand, you can work full-time while waiting for the work permit, but only if you applied under those conditions. You have a valid study permit and you apply within 90 days of your program ending. So just quickly, let's go through a timeline. So first of all, if you're writing your final exams, can you work? Yes, you're still a full-time student, so you can work. While you're waiting for your results, can you work? Yes, you don't have any indication yet. You're still waiting for your results. You're still a full-time student, so you can work. The school has now told you, congratulations, you have completed your program, okay? In that case, can you work? No, you cannot work. You have to stop working at that point. Then, if you apply for your postgrad work permit within 90 days of your program and while your study permit is still valid, at that point, you can start working full-time. All right, let's talk about permanent residence now.
Okay, so as we look at different PR routes, we'll see that many of them have a requirement for what is called high-skilled work experience. So when you graduate, it's going to be very important to know whether a job that you're considering is going to be considered high-skilled or low-skilled by IRCC. So what is the difference between high-skilled and low-skilled work? So IRCC has categorized all of the different jobs into different national occupation codes, or NOC codes. And these NOC codes are divided into 6 different tiers. And tiers 0, 1, 2, and 3 are considered high-skilled, whereas tiers 4 and 5 are considered low-skilled. The way that your job fits into these categories is based on the duties that you do, not the job title that you have. So each NOC code lists different duties that are associated with that NOC, and your everyday job duties need to mostly match what's listed in order to qualify under that NOC. A lot of people think that because the NOC code title matches their job title, that means they shouldn't qualify for that NOC. But IRCC actually wants to see that you do the duties of that NOC, and they don't actually really care about the title that much. So it's really important to check out the duties of the NOC and not just rely on the title. Another really important thing are the mandatory employment requirements. So also listed on the NOC page, they'll say what the requirements are for your education level or potentially your experience or licensing that you need to have in order to do that job. And you need to pay close attention to the language that they list. Sometimes they say that a certain education requirement may be required, and sometimes they say that it is required. And that language can change depending on, so if you have that requirement and you're doing that job and it is required, that means everything matches and that's great. But if they say that you need to, for example, have, let's say, a chartered accountant, a CPA designation, and you need that in order to be an accountant, and you're doing the work of an accountant, but you don't have that designation, if IRCC has listed that it's a requirement on the NOC, then you need to have that in order to work. If you don't have that, you're going to have a hard time claiming that NOC code for your experience. Another thing to note is that the NOC codes do tend to change, or they have changed in recent years. So a lot of the time we see people relying on things like using the same NOCs that their coworkers have used or their other friends have used. And it's just really important to keep in mind that the system can change. Don't just rely on what you read online or what you've seen your friends do. You need to investigate it for yourself and make sure that you really do meet the requirements of that NOC.
All right, so let's talk about express entry. Many of you probably have already heard about express entry. It's the most popular way to get permanent residence through our economic ground. But express entry is only half of the story. Only half of the permanent residence routes through economic immigration is express entry. There's another half that is for other ways. So let's first talk about express entry and how it actually works. So Express entry. In order to start the process, you have to create an online profile. You get to create an online profile by qualifying for one of three categories: the Federal Skilled Worker class, Canadian Experience class, or the Federal Skilled Trades class. Now, once you've created a profile, you're entered into the express entry pool for up to 1 year. If you don't get selected after 1 year, your profile will expire. Now, make no mistake, when you've entered into the express entry pool, you have not applied for permanent residence, okay? I don't know how many times, I'd probably hear this, a couple times a day from consultations that, oh, I've applied for a permanent residence. How did you apply? Oh, I entered myself into the pool. Did you get invited to apply? No. Did they apply? No, they have not applied. When you are in the express entry pool, you will get a series of points based on your background and whether or not you have provincial nomination. And every 2 weeks or so, there's a draw where the government invites people in the pool to apply. It's only after you have received the ITA, the invitation to apply, that you can actually apply for permanent residence. If you don't receive the invitation to apply, you have not applied for anything. You have just indicated to the government that you're interested in applying, but until you get that ITA, you cannot apply. So let's first talk about how to get into the pool. There are three categories. The first category, some of you may already qualify for, and that's called the Federal Skilled Worker class. In order to qualify for the Federal Skilled Worker class, you have to have 1 year of work experience that is high skilled, that is continuous in one occupation, but it could be anywhere in the world. And it has to be full-time, at least 30 hours a week for 1,560 hours, at least for 1 year. Okay, so this work experience is very different from the Canadian Experience class work experience. This work experience could be anywhere in the world. It could be while you're studying. It could be while you're self-employed. Okay. Other than the work experience, we also look at the other factors and put it together. You have to meet the minimum threshold of 67 points under the Federal Skilled Worker evaluation grid. Okay. You also have to have financial savings as well. So, in the past, we've been able to get many people permanent residents, even if they have never stepped foot in Canada. And that is because we were able to get them qualified under this category. Like I said, many of you guys, even though you're still studying, may qualify if you have this criteria. Now, the second category is called the Canadian Experience class. And the work experience for this class is the work experience that will give you points for express entry as well. So, right now we're just talking about getting into the pool. What you also have to think about is how many points will I have? Well, let me get out of the pool by getting invitation to apply. So the work experience for the Canadian Experience class that I'm going to describe to you is the same kind of Canadian work experience that will give you points. So the work experience for this is 1 year of Canadian work experience in Canada when you are not a full-time student and high skilled, and 1,560 hours. It does not have to be in one occupation. It does not have to be related to your studies, but you have to be an employee. So, sometimes people say, well, Elizabeth, you said I can't be a contractor. I have to be an employee. But does that mean I can't have a contract? No, everybody has a contract, okay? The difference between a contractor and an employee is the relationship between you and the employer. So with an employee, with my employees, I pay them a salary. And along with the salary, I deduct income tax, I deduct CPP, I deduct EI from that, okay? When I have a contractor, let's say I hire someone to paint my house, and I say, okay, how much is it to paint this room? And they say $2,000. I said, okay, great. Okay. Do I deduct EI and CPP and income tax from the $2,000 I give them? No way. They're not my employees. I contract them to do work for me, but they have their own business. They're self-employed, or they're working for another business. Okay. So same thing for you guys. If you go and find work with someone and they say, well, we don't really want to bother our accountant and put you on our payroll, we'll just give you a certain amount, you go and do your own taxes. In that situation, you will likely be deemed to be a contractor with the immigration officer, and they will not allow you to qualify under Canadian experience class or give you points for Canadian work experience. So you have to be very careful when you are taking work if you want to get permanent residence and use that work experience for permanent residence. You have to make sure that they are going to give you your payroll with all the deductions, and come tax season, they're going to give you a T4. Okay. Skilled trades, I'm not going to go too much into that. Most people don't need to go through that. Most people will go through Canadian experience class or the skilled worker class. Okay, so now that we talked about how to get into the pool, how do you get out of the pool? Well, here are how the points work. First thing is age. After you turn after you go into your 30th birthday, every birthday during your 30s, it's going to be -5, -6 points. In your 40s, it's a fast slide, -10, -11. By the time you get to your 45th birthday, you don't have to worry about age anymore at that point. But the bad news is that you get a 0. So compared to someone in their 20s who would have 110 points, someone in their late 40s who would get 0, that's a big, big difference. And there's not a lot we can do about age except to not wait. Apply as early as you can so that you can get the maximum points. Education. If you have 2 programs where one program was a 3-year program or more. So for example, if you did your bachelor's in another country and then you came and did your Sault College program, that really makes you jump. Language scores. Now language, because the points for the ITAs have been so high recently, they have become very, very important. And right now we are normally looking at CLB 9s. So for IELTS, it would be a 7 in reading, writing, and speaking, 8 in listening. There are also 2 other tests you can do, a CELPIP and recently the Pearson test as well. Okay. The relevant work experience, we talked about that, the Canadian work experience. Now the foreign work experience, we can also use, that is more similar to, so you can use self-employed work, but this is work you did outside of Canada. Spouses, education, language, work experience, Canadian work experience can also count for some points. Provincial nominee program, and Mary's going to be talking about this, but provincial nominee programs are programs where each province gets to create their own program for who they want to get permanent residence. And there are 2 kinds of provincial nominee programs. There are the express entry linked provincial nominee programs, where if you get selected and you get a nomination, you come back to the express entry pool and you add 600 points to your express entry application. But there are another kind where it's completely not express entry linked. So for those applications, you don't get 600 points for express entry, but once you're nominated, you apply directly for permanent residence. If you were studying before in Canada, for example, Sault College, you'll get 15 points for 1-year or 2-year programs and 30 points for 3-year programs. And arranged employment. Now, just because you have your postgrad work permit and you have a job, even if it was a permanent job, it doesn't mean that you have arranged employment. In order to get the 50 arranged employment points, you have to have either a LMIA or other kinds of employer-specific work permits in order to be able to get the arranged employment points. I don't have the time to talk about how to do that, but if you do have a job offer, there are certain kinds of work permits. For example, if you're from different free trade agreements, countries such as Peru, Colombia, Mexico, US, EU, UK, Chile, etc. And you have a job offer under certain profession, you might be able to get a work permit that way. Otherwise, we might be able to do certain LMIAs. There's an LMIA called a GTS, Global Talent Stream, where if you're one of the STEM occupations, the employer wouldn't need to have to recruit Canadians first. So anyway, we can certainly speak with you about your options for arranged employment. And oftentimes we see now that becomes a very important step because the points are so high right now for a lot of people to be able to get the points that they need. If you have brothers or sisters who are Canadians or permanent residents in Canada, you get 15 points. And the fluency in French, it's not necessarily everybody should study French because this French has to be at a certain level. It has to be at the CLB 7 level in order for you to get a big benefit from the French. Although if you can get to the CLB 5 level, there's a work permit, employer-specific work permit, that if you can speak and listen at the CLB 5 level, you can get a work permit without going through an LMIA for the Francophone. But for the permanent residents, you have to get the CLB 7 in order for you to have big benefit from speaking French. Trade certification, that's to do with the construction trades for the most part, and not a lot of people have that. But if you're in the construction trades and you're able to get the Red Seal certification, you can get 50 points for that. Now, in addition to the general draw points where they just look and see what your points are and invite everybody up in the pool who is above that score, IRCC last year started with new category-based draws. And so one, they had it for those who had French language proficiency against CLB 7 level, where basically only people who have that level in the pool are invited to apply. So then the numbers become much lower because the competition is much lower. They also have it for other occupations, such as healthcare occupation. There's a healthcare draw, STEM, trades, and transport. So sometimes, I've been telling people, and you have to have 6 months of work experience in this occupation in the last 3 years. So sometimes I've been telling people who just have been desperate and they can't do it, go and drive a truck. You drive a truck for 6 months, you get invited under the transport occupations, which is a much, much lower score than most other occupations. Okay, agriculture, agri-foods. So I've included here a link, and I'll be sending out these slides to everyone, okay, where you can check this out as well and see what occupations are under these category-based draws.
Okay, so as Elizabeth mentioned, there are also other ways to get points in express entry through the provincial nominee programs, which are also called P&Ps. Ontario's provincial nominee program is called the OINP. And the OINP has several different types of streams, which I'll take you through. Right now, we're going to talk about the express entry streams. So some of Ontario's streams are directly linked to the express entry system. And in Ontario, you can't just go and directly apply to the express entry OINP streams. To qualify for these streams, you first have to be in the express entry pool, and then you wait to receive a notification of interest from Ontario. Then, only if Ontario is interested in you and decides to choose your profile out of everyone in the express entry pool, then they'll send you a notification of interest. And if you qualify, you can get 600 extra points added to your CRS score. So who are they going to be giving out these notifications of interest to? So there are 3 categories that they've identified. The first is the human capital stream. So in order to receive a notification of interest in this stream, you need to be firstly in the express entry pool, and you need to have a bachelor's degree. This doesn't have to be a bachelor's degree from inside of Canada. It can be overseas. And they've also specified that there's going to be certain candidates that they might be interested in. So for example, in the past, they've prioritized people in tech or healthcare, and they can also specify other types of applicants like people with job offers or certain work experience. The next stream is the French-speaking stream. So for this stream, you need to have a bachelor's degree and a high level of French, which is a CLB 7 and a CLB 6 in English. So you also need to be in the express entry pool. And if you have those requirements, you could receive a notification of interest through the French-speaking stream. And then thirdly, there is the skilled trade stream. So Ontario has a list of specified trades that they're interested in for this stream. And if you're in the express entry pool and you have at least 1 year of work experience in Ontario within the last 2 years in one of the trades that Ontario has specified, then you could receive a notification of interest. You don't need a bachelor's degree for this stream, but you do need to have a valid work permit, and you need to have that 1 year of work experience in a skilled trade that Ontario has listed. So aside from those express entry link streams, there are these non-express entry link streams, which are also called the expression of interest or EOI streams. These streams do not link to your express entry, and they don't give you 600 extra points. It's a totally separate type of application. So these programs use an expression of interest system, which requires you to register your expression of interest in the OINP pool for the particular program that you're looking at. They have a different application process, and they also calculate points differently depending on what category you're applying for. So these streams can give extra points, for example, to people who have studied or have job offers in Northern Ontario, which is great for you guys. Once you've registered your expression of interest in the OINP pool in one of these categories, you're waiting for Ontario to do a draw for your program. If they do a draw for your program at your score level, they will send you an invitation to apply. So Ontario doesn't announce when they'll do their draws beforehand, so it is best to get in the pool as soon as you qualify, because you never know when Ontario will do another draw. If you do get selected, they issue you an invitation to apply, and then if you apply and get your nomination, then you can apply for PR through the federal government. And there are several different types of expression of interest streams. So some require you to have a certain level of education, like a master's and the PhD streams, and others are based on having a job offer from an Ontario business. So let's talk about those employer-based expression of interest OINP. So these are the job offer streams. For these streams, you as the applicant have to meet certain requirements, and you also need a job offer from an employer that meets certain requirements. So for all of these streams, the business that's supporting your application needs to have been in business in Ontario for 3 years. If they're inside of the GTA, they need to show that their gross income in the last fiscal year was 1 million and that they have 5 full-time Canadian or permanent resident employees. If they're outside of the GTA, they need to have 500,000 in income and have 3 full-time Canadian or permanent resident employees. The job offer itself has to be full-time and permanent means that there's no end date on your contract. So let's talk about the requirements for each of the streams. The first is the international student stream. So to qualify for this stream, you need to have a job offer that meets those requirements that I mentioned, And you also need to have completed your program of study in Ontario, and you need to apply within 2 years of graduation. You also need to have graduated from an eligible program. That means you've either done a 2-year degree or diploma in Ontario or a 1-year college program that grants an Ontario College graduate certificate. Aside from having the qualifying education credential within the last 2 years, you also need a high-skilled full-time job offer, and you need to be paid what's considered the low wage for your occupation according to your location of employment. The next stream is the skilled worker stream. So for this stream, you need to have a job offer that also meets those requirements above. And then you need to have at least 2 years of work experience within the last 5 years in the same occupation as your job offer. That work experience doesn't have to have been inside of Canada, and it doesn't have to be inside Ontario. You just have to be able to show that you do have those 2 years of experience within the last 5 years. The work experience and the job offer have to be high skilled, and the salary that you are being offered has to meet the median wage for your region. There are no education requirements for this stream, so it's something to look into potentially, even if you have a spouse who's not studying in Canada, they may be able to qualify for this program depending on their experience. And then finally, there's the in-demand job stream. So the OINP has a list of occupations that qualify for this program. It's not just every occupation, it's a very specific list of knocks that they're looking for. It's one of the only streams that does include low-skilled job offers and positions. So if you, or for example, your spouse, if you're working in a low-skilled position, you could potentially qualify. In order to meet the requirements, you need at least 9 months of experience in Ontario in that occupation, but it can be with different employers. And the salary that you need to make for this category is the median wage for your region.
So now let's get away from, so first we have the federal program, then we have the Ontario program. Now let's go into more regional programs. I had to say, you guys made a very good decision to go to Sault College. From an immigration point of view, not only are the people there fantastic, and the international student is some of the warmest people I've ever seen, and they really take care of you. But with regard to immigration, it's a very smart choice because you can see from the express entry, great federal, you know, it's one thing if you were in Quebec. Quebec, you don't qualify for the express entry. And those people in Quebec, if you don't speak French, they have no way to get from the residence then. So good, you're not in Quebec. Then you went to Ontario. Ontario, and part of the Ontario program, you're at a northern city. You study at a northern city. That gives you a lot of points compared to if you were studying, for example, in Toronto. So that's great. Second check. Third check is the regional programs. So Sault Ste. Marie is one of the few programs, cities who is part of the RNIP program, the Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot Program. Now, I just wanted to give you guys a heads up that this program is ending this summer, but it is supposed to be replaced by a new program that is the Rural Community Immigration Pilot to be in place coming up this fall. And we are expecting that program to be similar to the previous RNIP program. The government has not announced the new rules. We will certainly send you guys the rules once the new program comes out, if you're on our email list, okay? But the communication selection process will likely be there. That means that the first selection will likely go to the community and the city. And the city will be selecting who they want to participate and qualify for this program. And you'll need to have the city's support letter before you can apply for permanent residence. And likely, those of you who are attending the program in the community. So if I know some of you are probably on the Toronto campus, that won't qualify you. If you are attending in the Sault Ste. Marie community, that campus, then you likely will have a benefit. For example, in the RNet program, if you attended a 2-year program or more, you didn't have to have the work experience requirement there. Okay.
Okay, another potential option is the caregiver stream. So this program allows you to apply for PR if you can show that you have cared for either children or an elderly or special needs person in their home. It can't be that you are hired to work in an institution or a hospital. It has to be a private individual in their home. So if you work for 12 months and you have language scores above CLB 5, and you have a 1-year post-secondary education credential, then you could submit an application for PR through this stream. One thing to note about this stream is that it is unfortunately ending in June, but there is the expectation that the government will likely announce a continuation or an updated program after the current program ends. So if you're on our email list, we will be sending out an update about this once the new program is announced, if anything comes up. So you can keep an eye on the new developments there if this program is something you're interested in.
So we've talked a lot about different ways to get permanent residence. Now what we want to do is give you guys some practical advice about what you should be thinking about doing right now. The government in the last few years have made a few policy decisions that they are now kind of regretting because basically because of their policy decisions, the amount of temporary workers in Canada has really exploded. And as a result, to get permanent residence for all of these workers, it's looking, we had 700,000 workers last year. And in this year, there's only 220,000 spots available. So likely, 2/3 of the workers probably won't be able to get PR. So the competition is very, very high, especially for express entry. And the points for express entry are higher than they've ever been before. So we wanted to offer you guys some practical advice on what to do if you want to get permanent residence, some of the things to consider.
Okay, so the first one is to seek advice on how you might be able to raise your points. So this is going to be different for every person depending on your background, your education, your country of origin. It really is going to change. But some of the main ways that we see people increasing their points these days are firstly, increasing their work experience in and outside of Canada. So for every year of work experience you gain in Canada, that can add to your CRS score. And also if you've never gotten high skilled work experience outside of Canada, that can also significantly increase your score, again, depending on your personal situation. Another one is increasing your language scores. So with the current climate for getting PR and the level of competition, you really need to be maxing out your language. And what we see is if you're not getting CLB 9s, which is listening 8 and 7 and everything else on your IELTS, or 9s and everything on your CELPIP, then we do recommend that you rewrite your language, try to study, try to continue pursuing that until you do get to that level at least, because that is really what you need to be competitive, and it can impact and increase your score in a variety of places. Next would be potentially increasing your education. So if you get another education credential, that can add extra points. Getting arranged employment. So if you have an employer who can give you a closed work permit, if you have a work permit that has your employer's name on it and you have a full-time job offer from them, then you can get, in some cases, arranged employment, which can add 50 extra points to your score. Another is getting work experience under those categories that Elizabeth mentioned. So if you're working in healthcare, if you're working in tech, or if maybe you can start working in one of the category-based areas, that can be a great way to increase your chances. If you're a French speaker or you feel like it's possible for you to learn French at a high level, that can be a very good way to get a draw for express entry. They do French draws at a fairly low threshold pretty regularly. And then another one, as we discussed before, qualifying under one of those P&P based programs, either getting the 600 extra points or potentially just going through one of the provincial programs or like OINP could work for you.
And, express entry is not the end all and be all for permanent residents. There are a lot of other programs. For example, Mary was talking about the international student stream under the PNP. If you have a job offer and, then we might look at that. Caregiver program, entrepreneur routes. I didn't have a chance to go through some of those ways, but if you're interested in opening up your own business, that's great. And then really the government is really moving towards regional programs. So, for example, in the Atlantic provinces, they have some very good provincial nominee programs. So if you work, now all these things require you to have a job offer. So if you are able to find a job, in sometimes, provinces like the Atlantic provinces or Northwest Territories, or as well, communities such as Sault Ste. Marie that have the, RNIP or other community-based programs, you don't have to go through that whole competition with express entry. You can apply under those programs directly.
The next one is try to keep in status. So as Elizabeth mentioned, be strategic about when you apply for your postgrad work permit. You want to make sure that you are maximizing it to your greatest advantage for PR purposes. You also want to plan on how you might be able to extend your work permit beyond the postgrad work permit. So maybe that's getting an employer who would be willing to give you a labor market impact assessment, do a closed work permit. There's some options there, or potentially an LMIA exempt work permit. And another one is to team up with your spouse. So don't just think about PR for yourself. If you're married or if you're in a common law relationship, then you could be getting PR through your spouse instead. So you want a strategic plan that addresses both of your options for PR and maximizes your points that way.
All right. Now, let's get to questions. Before we do that, I just wanted to let you know that we do offer Sault College students a discount. Let us know you've come from Sault College, and we have a special discount for the consultations. It's only $100, and we do everything by video conference. And so you can feel free to come and we can set a plan for you that's very personal to you as to how to do everything. So today what we're offering you is advice. Not advice, it's general information, okay, about different programs. But it's always good to get advice on your personal basis as to what you yourself should do. All right, let's get to some questions. So if you haven't done so already, you can put your questions through the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen, and Mary and I will try to answer as many questions as we can. Okay. Let's start. Okay.
I'll ask you one. So in case of this authorized leave, do we lose the right to the postgrad work permit?
No, authorized leave is when you don't lose it. If you have authorized leave, you're still a full-time student and you don't lose your right to the postgrad work permit. If you go part-time, not in the last semester, but during the other ones, you would lose your postgrad work permit. So if you need a break during your studies, go and get that authorized leave. All right, so this person has two questions. They applied as a principal with a part-time job with a dependent, but included the husband's information from a full-time permanent job and part-time job to justify their incomes. I'm not sure what they're saying. Is there a possibility they will deny her the postgrad work permit? So basically she's saying that she's applying for postgrad work permit and she wants her spouse to get an open spousal work permit. Now with the postgrad work permit, to get an open spousal work permit based on a postgrad work permit, you are supposed to have a job offer. But she didn't have a full-time, she only had a part-time. But it seems like the husband is also able to have enough income to support the family. What do you think?
Yeah, so for the open spousal work permit, there's nowhere that it says that you have to have a full-time job in order to be the principal applicant supporting your spouse's open spousal work permit. So that's fine. I'm not exactly sure about this part about the full-time permanent job and part-time job to justify the incomes. If you're asking perhaps about financial support for the family for the duration of the work permit, that should be fine. If you submit proof that you're working in Canada on a part-time basis with your application, then that should be fine for your husband's open spousal work permit.
Okay. And then her second part of the question is, the study permit expires on July 26th. Transcript was issued on April 30th, applied on May 2nd for the postgrad work permit. She's wondering if she can work a day before she submits the postgrad work permit on May 1st.
So no, you do need to wait until you apply for your postgrad work permit in order to be authorized to work while you wait for a decision. Okay, I'll ask this one. So for 1 year of foreign skilled work experience, how long ago should the 1 year experience have been gained? I think they're maybe saying, can it be non-continuous?
Okay, so basically, in order to qualify to get into the pool for the foreign skilled worker, the federal skilled worker class, the 1 year of work experience has to be, you have to have at least 1 year. If it's beyond the 1 year, then it doesn't have to be continuous, but you have to have at least 1 year of continuous work experience that's high skilled in one occupation, and it has to be within the last 10 years of application. Okay, this person asked, is it legal that some employers, even if you qualify for the OIMP, is it legal for the employers to refuse to support you with the documents that you need to complete an application?
Right, so there's no obligation for an employer to support your OINP application. We actually work with lots of people who are trying to manage this exact question, and what we find to be effective is giving employers a lot of advance notice if you're planning on going through these programs and making sure that they're on board before you submit an application, for example, to the international student stream or whichever stream. Employers don't typically like to be blindsided when people get an invitation to apply through OINP. So it's really good to have that communication beforehand, but there is no obligation for your employer to support the application. If you're finding that your employer won't, then maybe you need to find a new employer who will support your OINP application, and explore your other options on the open work permit.
Just to give you an idea, the OIMP program for employer-based streams, their primary goal is to support Ontario employers. So their primary goal is to help employers who really need their employees to stay working with them, and allow them to get permanent residence. Their perspective is to support the employers, not necessarily to let everybody apply for permanent residence, okay? That being said, employers sometimes get confused with the OIMP compared to the LMIA, they don't know what their obligations are. They don't want to give you documents because it's private documents to them about payroll, about income, etc. As lawyers, we're able to create a firewall between you and the employers. As lawyers, we have client confidentiality, where if the employers give us the documents and you don't care about the document, you just want to get PR, then we can say we are going to submit your application. The employer shows us the documents. These documents are not shown to you. And that can create a sense of comfort for a lot of employers. But like Mary said, you don't want to just put your profile in and say that you have employer support and you don't actually have the employer support, and then go and ask the employer, as soon as you get an invitation, hey, you have to give me these documents right now. Employers hate that. Sometimes the employers don't qualify. Sometimes it takes them a while to get authorization and they have to think about it. So normally what we do is if someone qualifies, we first have a call with the employer, say, hey, this is the process. Are you comfortable with this? If they're comfortable with that, then we put someone in the pool. So then as soon as you get the invitation to apply, the employer is ready to go and they're ready to provide the documentation and forms. And we also have explanations as well, explanation letters as well for them.
Okay. I have been studying in Canada for the last 3 years. Before that, I have over 1 year of Tier 3 overseas work experience. Do these overseas work experiences count for the Federal Skilled Worker Program?
Yep, they do. Yes. Okay, so if someone studies a diploma and after graduating does not find a job opportunity, what's the best way to apply for permanent residence?
That's a great question. Most of the PR routes do require you to have some kind of job. There's a few that can be done through just types of education. Like if you did a master's degree or a PhD, then you don't need to have a specific job or work experience. But I would say the majority of the programs do require work experience. So it's going to be challenging if you don't have that. You can always get the work experience overseas and apply for the Federal Skilled Worker Program. So if you don't have any opportunities here, potentially you can look at doing it overseas, but getting work experience in Canada is pretty vital to most PR applications. I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, and I would say, this is a question that you should be asking in a consultation. And you should be asking this question very, very early on in the process. Maybe you might not be able to find a job in a certain sector. Maybe you might be able to find a job in another sector. Maybe you need more time to find a job and a 1-year postgrad work permit will not be enough. If that's the case, you need to come for a consultation before you apply for that 1-year postgrad work permit, right? All right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How much is a session for Sault College students, and can they be with their wife in the session?
We charge $100 plus tax, and absolutely bring your spouse along. It is a tag team sort of situation for the most part, and if you have a spouse, you can work together to achieve your goals. While we are students, which PR programs can we apply for?
Okay, so while you're a student, if you have, for example, high skilled work experience overseas, you could potentially apply for the Federal Skilled Worker Program. Typically, while you're studying, you're going to gain a lot of points by completing your program and by working after you study. So that's usually what's going to make you competitive. You can get yourself in the pool, but you're probably going to need to finish your degree to be able to actually be qualified for a PR, competitive for a PR stream.
And also don't forget about your spouse. If you have a spouse who you're married to, or if you're common law with them, meaning that you have lived with them in a conjugal relationship for at least a year, if they have a open work permit, they might be able to work in certain programs and be able to be eligible for permanent residence sooner than you guys. Okay. So again, come for a consultation with your family, with your spouse, and we can figure it out for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so before our study period ends, is it possible for us to apply for PR? I have 7 years of experience in healthcare outside of Canada.
Very, very much could be. We have to have a consultation. Maybe you qualify for the healthcare draws. We'll have to see. What if you left the school you were to start afresh in another school for a year program, and I'm doing 2-year program, but I have problem when applying for the postgrad work permit?
So that's a question we'd probably need to know more background information about what happened in the switch between schools. But theoretically, if you do another program after you complete one program, certainly you can still apply for the postgrad work permit. You can do 2 1-year programs and get a 3-year postgrad work permit. There's going to be other factors there that will determine whether or not you're going to have a problem with your postgrad work permit. Okay, I'm a licensed physiotherapist back in my home country, but I'm confused how to enter the pool for express entry. Should I work as a physiotherapy assistant or in any other field in hospital?
Again, this is a very specific question. Come for a consult and we'll figure it out for you. Okay, so this person says his wife is currently in Canada with him on a spousal open work permit. When they apply for the postgrad work permit, would she be eligible for the open work permit? So in order to get, oh, why am I answering my own question? You answer.
So yeah, in order to get an open spousal work permit, you as the spouse who's applying for your postgrad work permit, you need to have a job. So you need to be working at that job. And then if you are, your spouse can apply to extend her open spousal work permit.
Okay.
Currently, I'm in healthcare leadership course. Am I eligible to work in marketing stream? Because I got a job in the marketing sector, I want to make my way of PR. In which stream can I apply? I'm a Sault College student.
So you don't need to have a job that's related to your studies in order to qualify for express entry. Okay. You can do whatever you wanted on your open work permit. As to what stream you should apply for, which way, come for a consult, and we can certainly talk about that. This person says, for the May 2024 intake student visa, can my husband and kids still apply for the open work permit? And the open students permit if they are still in their home country, so they don't hold a work permit.
Currently, okay. Well, it depends on what program you're in. I'm going to assume it's not going to qualify. Yeah. So because the rules changed in January 2024, spouses are no longer eligible for the open spousal work permit unless you're taking a master's or a PhD. So it's unlikely that they'd qualify. So my passport is expiring in December 2024, and so my study permit and so is my study permit. I'm in my first semester, so I'm planning to renew my study permit after renewing my passport. Is it possible to do so? And can I get my passport stamped again?
So the answer is yes and yes. So you certainly can renew your, extend your study permit, apply to extend it when? Before your current study permit ends, okay? And then you can then, after you get your new study permit, you don't get a visa together with the study permit inside Canada. You only get the study permit. Once you have the study permit, if you wanted to travel and re-enter Canada, you can apply for a visa based on your study permit after that. Okay. All right. So this person says their course, healthcare leadership. I guess they're taking a course called healthcare leadership. They wanted to change it to PSW. Will this affect them applying for PR?
So as long as you can make that transition, you want to make sure that the changing of your courses is fine from the study permit and postgrad work permit perspective. But applying for PR, it can be helpful to work as a personal support worker. You'll want to check the new caregiver stream to see what happens there. But generally speaking, yeah, working in healthcare, whether that's potentially as a personal support worker or other healthcare positions, can be beneficial for PR.
Definitely answer this one.
Yeah, I missed this. Okay, they're asking about the recording link.
Yes, we will send out a recording of this. It's usually put onto our YouTube as well. Our YouTube has all of the different webinars that we've done before, and a lot of this we post a lot of videos and a lot of information as well on our social media. So check out that. That might give you a lot of different kinds of information as well, and a lot of updates as well we post on there. Okay, last question. Currently, they are a BAMS doctor. I'm not sure what that means, from home country. It's a healthcare degree in India. And currently, they are studying in one semester in healthcare leadership. They're assistant doctor in Canada. Oh, can a job as an assistant doctor in Canada or other pathways in healthcare, like express entry or directly PR pathway, please? I think.
Yeah, this one would probably require a consultation. There's a lot of moving pieces in that question. But you potentially could qualify for federal skilled worker. It really depends on what the experience is and a couple other factors.
All right, we did it. We answered all the questions. All right. So, Heather, are you still there?
I am, yes, sorry, I was following along with questions. Yes, so thank you both for your time and answering everyone's questions today. I love seeing when we can actually get through all the questions. It doesn't always happen, so thank you for sharing, thank you for the information and for your time. And for the students, there will be access to a recording available to you. I think it'll be sent to the list of everybody who registered, is that correct?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
Okay,
Okay,
so
well,
thank
thanks
you
so
so
much.
much.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been wonderful meeting with you guys. It's not an easy road for you guys to travel, but you guys are taking the right first steps. And if you need any help, we'll be here to help you. Take care, guys.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye.